Hi, everyone. My name's Chase, and like Jessica said, we recently had the privilege of being the first nonprofit to go through Combinator. So to tell you just a quick 1 minute about Watsi, we're a nonprofit crowdfunding platform. So the easiest way to think about us is that we're basically like Kickstarter for healthcare around the world. So you can go on our website, see photos and read stories of patients all over the world that need access to low-cost, high-impact medical care but can't afford to pay for it. And you can donate as little as $5 and directly fund, say, a life-saving heart surgery for a 12-year-old girl in Nepal, or directly fund a prosthetic arm for Jose, a 46-year-old man, father of 5 in Guatemala. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what on earth I was going to talk about today. And I thought about all the good startup presentations I've ever heard in my entire life. And I realized that every good presentation falls into one of two categories. There are informational presentations where really smart people get on stage and tell you that A plus B plus C equals startup success. And there are motivational presentations where really successful people get on stage and tell you really funny stories about all the mistakes they made and all the hard lessons they learned on the long road to success. And I was really frustrated when I realized that I couldn't give either one of those two presentations today. On the one hand, I'm not experienced or smart enough to have the slightest idea what the formula for startup success is. If I did, Watsi would be doing $10 billion a year. And on the other hand, I'm not successful enough to tell you funny stories about all the lessons I think I learned, because I have absolutely no idea if those lessons are ultimately going to result in success or if they're ultimately going to result in failure. So I procrastinated like crazy. 2 days ago, I remembered the best startup presentation I've ever heard in my entire life. The best startup presentation I ever heard was when Brian and Nathan of Airbnb came to Y Combinator and told us a story about how Airbnb spent their first 1,000 days, 1,000 days, searching high and low for product market fit. I've never left a presentation more motivated, more inspired in my entire life. But I had one problem with the presentation, one nagging thought that I just could not get out of my mind. And it was that Brian and Nathan and everyone else at Airbnb, they earned their right to come to Y Combinator and tell that story. But I couldn't help but go home and wonder how many other startups have persisted for 1,000 days, or maybe a hell of a lot longer, and ultimately failed. And that's when I realized the one thing I could actually talk about today, the one story I could tell you guys. I could tell you our story, the story of Watsi, and I can tell it with an honesty that successful people can't. I can tell you I can tell you the story of Watsi on our 999th day, the day before anyone knows if we're going to be a massive success or if we're just going to be a spectacular failure. So about 2.5 years ago, I was serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Central America, and I was sitting on the back of a bus right at the Panama-Costa Rica border. And I remember that at that point in my life, that bus was the absolute last place in the entire world I wanted to be. It was hot, it was muggy, I was sweating like crazy. There was this old guy sitting next to me that kept kind of like nudging into me, and so I was just curling up against the window trying to sleep, but the bus was too bouncy, so I couldn't sleep against the window. I remember I just kept constantly smelling mildew because I'd been living in the tropics for 1.5 years. Your clothes never get a chance to dry, and so I'm just smelling the mildew coming off the collar of my shirt. I remember there's a black North Face duffel bag at my feet, and in that black North Face duffel is every single thing in the world I own. I'm $10,000 to $12,000 still in student loan debt. I have another $1,000 to $2,000 in credit card debt I have no hope of paying off until I'm done with the Peace Corps. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is that I just the day before gotten off a plane from the United States. I was back home in the United States. I was there for my grandmother's funeral. But while I was there, I caught up with a bunch of my old college and high school friends in San Francisco. And I have no idea why I thought this, but before I saw my friends, I figured they were all going to be miserable. I was the guy that had spent the last 5 to 7 years working with nonprofits traveling around the entire world. I figured they were living the office space life, working dead-end jobs in cubicles in San Francisco, miserable day in and day out. But that wasn't the case. My friends were all happy. Every single one of my friends had an awesome apartment. They actually had girlfriends and boyfriends. They went out. They got to date. They were having fun. But beyond that, they were working for companies and building products and solving problems that they cared about. They were happy. They had found a way to do good and do well. And in contrast, the 6 years I had spent traveling around the world working with nonprofits, it seemed slow, it seemed bureaucratic, it seemed underfunded. It didn't come with the same energy and optimism and innovation that San Francisco had. And so this is a direct quote, but I told every single person I knew, my friends and my family, when I was back in San Francisco, I said, I'm done with this. That's it. I'm not going to sell my soul. I said, I'm not going to sell my soul, but I'm going to come back to San Francisco, and like all of you, I'm going to find a way to do well and do good. So there I am, sitting in the back of that bus in Central America, trying to think about how on earth I'm going to get through my last 5 months in the Peace Corps. And this woman gets on the bus. This is a picture of one of the actual buses. Woman gets on the bus, and she starts asking all these local passengers for donations to pay for her son's medical treatment. Now, the second I hear that, I just tune her out and stop listening. I'm immediately skeptical. People in Central America get on the bus every single day, one after another, asking for donations, preaching, selling products. No one ever buys. But a few minutes later, I noticed that this woman was walking down the aisle of the bus toward me, and all of the local passengers were giving her money. And I could not, for the absolute life of me, figure out why all of these local people trusted this woman when they had never trusted all the women that came before her. And it turns out that these people trusted this woman because she had her son's medical record with her. She was passing it around the bus. It was in a red folder. They were grilling her with questions about the doctor or the hospital or the condition, and she seemed to earn their trust. She got to the back of the bus. I gave her 500 colones, which is like $1 because all these local farmers are donating. I didn't want to be that one stingy gringo that doesn't give her any money. She gets off the bus, and I get goosebumps. And I think, it's crazy that we have websites like Kickstarter where with the click of a button, you can crowdfund really any type of creative project. We have websites like Donors Choose, where with the click of a button, you can crowdfund a classroom project for a student really anywhere in the United States. Why on earth is there not a website where we could crowdfund really the most important thing of all, which is healthcare for people that can't afford to pay for it? So right then, having been the most jaded I've ever been in my entire life 5 minutes earlier, I decided to start WotC, and I decided to name it after the town I was traveling through when the woman got on the bus. So this was got home. So this was my little hut in the Peace Corps. It had one outlet, one light, running water for 1 hour a day. But for those last 5 months were really the best 5 months of my life. I just became obsessed with WotC. All I could do was think about WotC for 10 to 15 hours a day. And I would play a game, and the game I would play is I would just think up every possible issue or problem or externality that could arise with the WotC model, and I'd try and come up with a solution for 5 months. And to you guys, that probably sounds crazy. Most of you could probably build WotC in 2 months, and here I am sitting in the middle of nowhere thinking about the idea for 5 months. But in retrospect, those 5 months for me were some of the most important 5 months in WotC's history. And the reason for that is that nonprofits oftentimes need to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more skeptical, and a little bit more introspective than for-profits. And the reason for that is that with nonprofits, it's often really, really hard to know if you're succeeding or if you're failing. With a for-profit, I envy all of you guys. It's so simple. You build a product. If people want that product, they buy it and they give you money. The better your product, the more money they give you, the more people buy it, the more you succeed. The worse your product, the fewer people buy it, the less money they give you, the less you succeed. You can measure success in real time, and you can measure success in dollars and cents. Nonprofits are a lot more complicated. Nonprofits, we have to go to one group of people. We have to convince them to give us money. We have to turn around 180 degrees, take that money, and give a product to an entirely different group of people. And that's where the problem is. It's really hard to get feedback from that second group of people. It's hard because of communication. They often speak a different language. They're living in a really isolated area. They don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to a cell phone. Maybe they're not even literate. It's also difficult because when you're giving people something for free, or when you're giving people something that's heavily subsidized, they're often really reluctant to give you any negative or critical feedback at all for fear that you're going to stop giving them whatever it is you're giving them. And it's also hard because sometimes you give people things that help them on day one, and they end up hurting them on day 365. I remember when I learned this lesson the first time, before I was in the Peace Corps, I was living and working in Haiti. And my third week in Haiti, a local Haitian friend of mine took me to this outdoor Haitian market. Got to the market, and there's 50 plus Haitian women, and there are little groups of women, and maybe 5 to 7 to a group, and they're all squatting in kind of like a semicircle. In the first group of women, a bunch of eggs. They're selling eggs, and the second group of women are squatting down, and they're selling plantains and bananas. And then my friend taps me on the shoulder and he says, Chase, look at the third group of women. Look at the third group of women. They're squatting down just the same, but they have white bags coming up in front of them, and the top of the bags are rolled down. On the front of the bags are an American flag, and inside the bags are rice with a little cup to scoop out a cup of rice. And he said, those women are selling rice for pennies on the dollar. They're selling rice for 1/100th of what it should actually cost. So the reason they're selling rice for so cheap is that every time there's a humanitarian disaster or there's a crisis in Haiti, what happens is a bunch of nonprofits and a bunch of governments, many of them in the United States, but not only, go to one group of people, they ask for money, they take that money, they go to US companies, they buy a bunch of rice, they send that rice to Haiti, and they give it to people that are starving. Makes a lot of sense. The problem is that this has happened so many times, right, that we've flooded the Haitian market with free or heavily subsidized rice. And he said, Chase, we've put all the local farmers out of business. How can a local Haitian rice farmer compete with a free product? And I remember hearing that story and getting really frustrated and thinking, but the problem is so clear, right? People are hungry, but the solutions and really the whole nonprofit world can oftentimes just be really complicated. So I got back to the United States after the Peace Corps. We put together a volunteer team. We were 10 people. We had Grace, who was in India at the time, helping us with marketing. We had Jesse in Portland doing all of our code. We had Howard in South Carolina doing all of our finances. And we'd get on a Google Hangout every Tuesday night, and we'd work on WOTC. We had no funding, no office, no salaries, no users, no revenue, and we didn't want any of those things. We didn't care. We didn't have any desire. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was build a big nonprofit organization. We were only doing WOTC because we thought it was cool, because we thought it was fun, because we wanted to start a nonprofit that we ourselves would donate to. And in retrospect, that being small and being obscure actually gave us a huge advantage. It enabled us to do whatever we wanted. We were beholden to no one, and we could take risks, and we could do things that the big nonprofits could never do. So during that year and a half, we made 5 decisions, which I think shaped the future of WOTC. The first was we decided to be radically transparent. We were going to be the most transparent nonprofit in the world. That means exposing all of our operations, all of our financials, and even doing extra work to do things like take screenshots of each funds transfer and post them online so people can see exactly where their money is going if they donate on our website. The second thing we did is a 100% model. If you donate on WOTC, 100% of your donation funds medical care. Will never take a cut no matter what. Third thing is minimal fundraising. The third thing we decided as a team was just minimal fundraising. We had all seen how operational fundraising can just destroy nonprofits. It is such a distraction. There are so many nonprofits out there that get so obsessed and so dependent on fundraising, things like annual galas, that they forget about why they started the nonprofit in the first place. We decided we were going to have a circular organizational structure. What that meant is that there's no bosses, there's no hierarchy, right? There's no management, and that everyone at WOTC is responsible to every other person. And we even got rid of founder and co-founder titles. There are no founders at WOTC. We believe WOTC is in a perpetual state of being founded. It's crazy to me. Every new person that joins our team brings something completely new. They change the entire trajectory of the organization. They change the future of WOTC. It's nuts to think that we've been founded, right? We're constantly changing. And the last thing we decided was that whenever we were making a decision, any decision that impacted our patients or that impacted our donors, that we'd always treat our patients and our donors exactly how we would want to be treated if we were in their specific situation. So we worked on WOTC for a year and a half, every Tuesday, built the site for nothing, and then spent $3,000 to try and get a nonprofit, which we did ourselves and got denied, and then we figured out a way to get it. But we posted, I'll never forget the day we launched. We launched on August 23rd of 2012. We launched at 9 a.m. in the morning, and we sent out an email to our entire network. And I remember thinking, okay, it's going to go crazy now. 10 minutes, no donations. 15 minutes, no donations. Crickets. My mom donated. Then Grace's mom donated. Then Jesse's mom donated. Our friends and family slowly donated. And then about an hour and a half, 2 hours after we sent out the email, that was it. That was our big fancy launch. 2.5 years of work. That was it. And so I said, I decided that I wanted to post to Hacker News. I'd never posted to Hacker News in my entire life. I'd never even made a comment. I was too scared that people were just going to destroy me. But I decided not to tell our team because I figured no one was going to upvote it, and I didn't want them to all get disappointed. So my plan was that I would post to Hacker News, and if it got upvotes, I'd tell the team. But if it didn't get upvotes, I was just going to delete it and pretend like it never happened. And so I posted to Hacker News, I don't know, maybe it probably says on there, I can't see, but probably 11 a.m. that morning. And by lunchtime, we were the #1 post on Hacker News. Sent 16,000 unique visitors to WotC. We funded every single medical treatment almost instantly in our entire pipeline. We had 189 comments on Hacker News, hundreds of tweets, hundreds of Facebook posts, hundreds of emails, text messages. It was just absolutely crazy. And I remember I told my boss, I was working in finance in the city at the time, and told my boss, I need the day off. And I just sat in my desk shaking, answering Hacker News comment after Hacker News comment for the entire day. So after we launched, we got Hacker News, and then a few days later, NBC picked it up and wrote an article about WotC, which was the coolest thing ever. And then a few days after that, I was in bed, and I got a Google alert that TechCrunch had written an article about WotC. I had no idea they were going to write, and I have no idea they even knew who WotC was. And I remember, this is so embarrassing. I remember I was crying. I was so happy. We were on TechCrunch. That was the biggest thing in the entire world. I'd been reading TechCrunch, and WotC was on TechCrunch. And I didn't even know they were going to write about us. And I remember turning to my girlfriend at the time and saying, do you think all the startups that TechCrunch writes about are secretly as crappy as we are? And she's like, well, what? And she's like, what do you mean? WotC's not crappy. And I'm like, I know WotC's not crappy. The idea is awesome and the website's good. But we have no office, no full-time employees. You can't even donate to a patient on our website because we're completely out of patients. And you would donate on WotC, and we wouldn't even send you we wouldn't even send you a receipt. You would just donate, and that was it. It was absurd. But none of that mattered. We were on TechCrunch, and we were on top of the world. And so then, all good startup stories, this is our actual numbers. This is monthly revenue since day one. TechCrunch was that first kind of blob. Our designer kind of smoothed this out, so it's normally pointy. I think she was trying to secretly make us look better. But that first trough of sorrow was we never thought about what would happen after we launched. We never in our wildest dreams thought that we would fund all the patients. We thought we had 6 months worth of patients, and they were funded in a few hours. And so everything was broken, nothing was working, and I decided to quit my job, and I said, I got to do this. I got to try and do WotC full time. And the next rational thing to do was to fundraise. We had no money, and the only way to run an organization is to get some money and pay people. So I went out, started fundraising, and fundraising was just a complete disaster. No one gave us money. The worst part, I can tell you one of the worst parts about being a nonprofit is that no one will ever tell you no. Everyone will go like this. They'll pat you on the back and they'll say, good job. You're doing something really good for the world. That's awesome. I really want to help you. But they'll never write you a check, right? And so I did that for 3 months, just spinning my wheels. I kept telling the team, we're so close. There's these 50 people that are about to give us some money, I promise. Never gave us money. So then, about 3 months later, it's November 22nd, and I'm flying to Southern California to spend Thanksgiving with my dad. The plane lands in Southern California. I check my email, and in my personal email, there's a message from Paul Graham. And Paul Graham had seen a recent post about WotC on Hacker News. He found my personal email through my Hacker News account, and he just wrote 2 sentences. And the sentences were, are you in the Bay Area? If so, I'd like to meet. And I remember being so excited that I got off the airplane and left all my luggage for Thanksgiving on the airplane. Just left it there. All I needed was my cell phone, just like this, off the airplane. So Jesse flew down from Portland. We met with PG a few weeks later in Mountain View. Met with Jessica. He wrote us our first check within an hour. I'd been meeting with people for 3 months, and no one wrote us a check. PG made our first donation. We joined Y Combinator. Y Combinator is the best thing to ever happen to WotC. People always ask why. I'm already running out of time. But people always ask why, and the big three things we got out of YC, the first was focus. It enabled Jesse to come from Portland, Grace to come from New York. The three of us lived and worked in Mountain View. All we focused on was WotC. And beyond that, what Airbnb had actually taught us was to only focus on one metric. We only looked at one metric for 3 months. And the only thing we tried to do for 3 months was to get more people to donate, was weekly donations, just to get more people to donate. We managed to increase weekly donations 30% every week. The second thing YC gave us was a network. It's like when you go to college, and you're like, wow, everyone here is kind of like me. YC is like that, but times 1,000. I mean, it's the most amazing network of advisors and entrepreneurs I could honestly ever have imagined being a part of. And the third thing was the stamp of approval. I think that now that YC is accepting nonprofits, this might actually maybe be more important for nonprofits than for-profits. But in the nonprofit world, nonprofit philanthropists and foundations are the most risk-averse group of people on the planet. No one is willing to take a bet on a new nonprofit. Everyone's afraid of being burned. And to have YC come on board and say, we're taking a bet, we're making a public bet on WotC, made it really easy when we eventually went out and started fundraising. So we went out, fundraising take 2, and I learned my lesson the first time, and I said, we made a new rule, that we're only going to fundraise for 3 months, and that's it. Even if we don't raise a dime in 3 months, we're not going to fundraise again for 18 months. We're going to work as volunteers. I'll bartend. Screw it. I don't care. I'm not going to fundraise a day longer than 3 months. So went out, started fundraising, and again, it was a complete disaster. And it was a complete disaster because I didn't know what we were selling. When you're a for-profit, what you're selling is obvious. You're selling a return. Give me $1 million, and I'm going to give you $1 billion in 10 years. Just a given. You don't even need to talk about it. With a nonprofit, everyone gives you money for a different reason, and it's really complicated. And at the start, I got talked into reading these god-awful books on nonprofit fundraising that just ruined my brain. But these books told me that I should sell emotion. They said you should go out and tell stories about your patients and make people happy and make people cry and then ask them for money. And I felt like a just complete fraud. It was just stupid. And so I tried to do that, and the meetings were just terrible. No one gave us money, so that lasted for like 2 days. And then the next thing I tried was I thought we should sell impact. A lot of nonprofits do this. You sell impact, right? So created all these really fancy models and went to all of our donors and said, if you give us money, it's better than giving all these other nonprofits money. You give us money, look at this model, and you're going to somehow manage to help education in Rwanda in 15 years by funding this girl's medical care. But I felt like a sophist. I was just like inventing numbers. WotC was 6 months old. I had no idea what impact we were going to have in 6 months. So that didn't work either. And then I finally realized what we were actually selling at WotC. And what we're selling at WotC is a vision. And that vision is incredibly simple. If I asked all of you right now to raise your hand if you would give me $500 for global health right now, raise your hand if you would give me $500. Oh my God, we should all go get beers after this talk. Now, look to the person sitting next to you. Actually, look at them in the eye. I'm like matchmaking right now, I can see like. Look at the person in the eye. And now imagine I told you that unless you give me $500 right now, that person's gonna drop dead in the next minute. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're gonna let that person die. You're the people I don't want to get beers with after. That was the vision we were selling at WotC, and the vision was incredibly simple. The vision was that if we make the world smaller, we're going to make the world better, and that vision worked. We went out, we had 138 meetings in 5 states over the course of 3 months. Of those 138 meetings, 36 people were at WotC a check, over $1,000. Of those 36 people, 13 were at WotC a check, over $25,000. The average, the median donation amount was $25,000 at WotC. We raised $1.2 million, which if you do the math is $8,800 per meeting, which is just mind-boggling. We got really lucky. Some of the best people, some of the best technologists, best investors, and best philanthropists in the world took a bet on us. Paul Graham donated. Ron Conway donated. Khosla donated. Tencent donated. Jeff Ralston donated. It blew my mind, and that's not a responsibility that we take lightly. WotC's in a crazy place right now. On the one hand, things are as good as I could have ever imagined. First nonprofit in Y Combinator. We have 18 months of runway in the bank. We just built the most awesome team I could have ever imagined. We're in donated awesome office space in the Mission by Teespring, my favorite freaking startup in the world, with all of our friends. Like, we are living the dream, and it's awesome. And on the other hand, things are just crazy. We just got started, we have a ton of challenges. We just started getting hit with an onslaught of credit card fraud. These jackasses in Jamaica are stealing credit card numbers and donating on Watsi to see if they work. $1 billion healthcare company, is talking about taking us to court for trademark infringement, right? And our operations, we're pulling in so many patients, which is a good problem to have. They're just crumbling. Our donations, like our operations are Grace Gary. It's just Grace. She just processes everything. Nothing is automated, and it's all breaking. So there's a ton of challenges at Watsi. But if I can offer one piece of advice in my 25 minutes of rambling, even though I said I wouldn't offer any advice, my one piece of advice would be this, and it's find something to work on that you care about more than yourself. And as far as I'm concerned, Watsi cannot fail. It's actually impossible. And the reason it's impossible is that all we ever have to do is fund one more patient, one more human life. That's all we ever have to do. And if I have to spend the rest of my life trying to fund that one patient, and even if I die before it happens, my life will have been a success because I went out trying to do something, right? I went out trying to do something that mattered more than I did. And I don't know, but for me, I couldn't imagine a better way to go out than that. Thanks, guys.